Hello, we are very much into the countdown to FESPA right now. It's what, 6, 7 weeks? It feels like not very long at all.
Yeah, and it's time's moving fast as ever.
It is. Delighted though that Graeme Richardson-Locke has taken the time to have a chat with me. Good morning, Graeme. Nice to speak to you again. Nice to see you.
Hi, Jack.
Do you want to very quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Graeme Richardson-Locke. I'm the head of associations and technical lead at FESPA. I've been here for nearly a decade, I think now. It's amazing how time flies. Prior to that, I've been in print for 40 plus years. Started as a screen printer originally, so working as an apprentice and working on machines and working through production to production management. And then worked in various sectors from high street retail, display to signage to unusually military electronics and very high precision industrial printing, through to joining FESPA with a bit of a as a color management geek. And then more recently have got involved in sustainability advocacy. I started by doing a course at the Stockholm Institute of Resilience in planetary boundaries. I became interested in what it really means to try and make a business more sustainable, not just environmental protection, but economic risk management, and of course, harnessing the benefits of looking after people and working with all of our interested parties. That has been a bit of how I got here. And, I'm really, really happy to be with FESPA and to be involved in this role in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I see you've been with FESPA for a long time. You haven't always been in this sort of sustainability role, as it were. It's pushed you into that position.
So I suppose it was about maybe 4 years, 3, 4 years ago, just as a lot of kind of interest in sustainable management practice emerging, plenty of greenwashing, the sustainability 1.0 was all about eco print, green print and all this kind of stuff. And I'm engaged with, our international community of member associations. So I get to see what's happening out in the market broadly across multiple countries. And what I felt was important was that we also at FESPA look at what we're doing and how we can improve our sustainability performance as an organization. It kind of came from advocacy to then being the guy who said we should go for ISO 2012-1, which is the standard for sustainable events management systems. And I'm not sure I always am grateful to myself for that suggestion because it's not always easy, this stuff. But we have achieved progress in our third year we've just been through audit, and we've succeeded in transitioning to the standard. Went from a 2012 version when it was first launched for the UK Olympics. That's where it kind of arose from. And now 2024, the standard has been updated to reflect more demands in terms of climate change, procurement guidance on, looking out for modern slavery, child labour, those sort of things, and aligning our objectives and goals to UN Sustainable Development Goals. So it's a fascinating, if not lengthy topic.
Well, it is, isn't it? And this is specifically for the exhibitions.
Yeah, so we've done two things really. The Sustainable Events Management Standard is to help us with our European, so FESPA Global Print Expo exhibition. We haven't brought other exhibitions in our portfolio into scope yet because I think, you have to, what is it they say? You have to learn to walk before you can run, and that's where we're at. We also looked at our head office carbon emissions and what we might be able to do to reduce our impact in the building. So that has also we're in our third cycle of carbon emissions reporting for our HQ activities. Now, that's a funny one because it's kind of like, things like staff commute, staff travel, procured goods and services. So the emissions that are accounted for in FESPA.com to the way we light, heat and manage the building, they're the kind of activities that we're currently doing.
So you can control that at sort of your own point of view for where you work. When it comes to the exhibitions itself, you've got hundreds of other companies that are doing their thing, as it were. Probably a little bit like herding cats for you. But what
Yeah,
is the
for
sort
sure.
of your objective for the big events themselves? What have you put in place to be more accountable, sustainable in the actual events?
So the main thing is the way we organise the partnerships that we choose to engage with. So if we're working as we do with, stand builders to build our feature stands and, our own parts of the exhibition experience, we look to work with businesses that have better maturity in their sustainable management. So people that ideally have ISO 2012-1, because that is kind of very useful. But, people that have attained certification to ISO 14001. Of course, we're interested in EcoVadis and other sustainability certification schemes. Importantly, one of the things that we have to do with our partners is we have to ask them what their current certification number is, and we have to do the due diligence and go and check with their awarding body to make sure that what we're being told is fact. So it's just leaning into being more resilient in the way, more scrutiny, more care in who you choose to work with. Waste, of course, is an important issue with running an exhibition of the size of FESPA Global Print Expo. And our ops and some of my colleagues are involved in the kind of communications with exhibitors about materials that are on the banned list. There are some things like chipboard that are not allowed to be used. There are other chemicals. I can't remember the name of it, but there's a particular filler that's absolutely horrendous that has been banned, and we take it seriously, and we work with exhibitors to make sure that they understand our requirements, and the goal is to reduce landfill and waste generated through the event. So the way that kind of manifests in our builds is we're looking at materials like aluminium, B matrix frame systems, for example, is a really good system if it's been used many, many times. When we did our last event in Berlin, we used a system that had been in operation for over 100 cycles. So it had no residual emissions in the framework. So we rented that, and then we used recycled polyester, which we use dye sub printing on to do stretch graphics around the entire build. So we actually had one material for the entire build. At the end of the show, at breakdown, it meant that we could take this massive graphics, compress it into a relatively small volume of material for then transport for recycling. And unfortunately, we can't upcycle it, take all the color out and make it into lovely virgin white polyester again. But what we can do is we can get it recycled into the light block layer in light block material for future use.
And obviously, these are the stands and the structures that you're in control of. I mean, some of your exhibitors have got big stands themselves. Do they do it under your specification, or how does that work for them?
Yeah, I mean, our ops team manage the process of working with exhibitor partners, and they have a very well-established management system for working with them. So obviously, we're responsible for the safety, the conformance, and the requirements for each and every one of those builds. We have, floor managers who scrutinize everything that is going on during building. Jack, you'll know because you've been in exhibition halls when they're being built up. It's a fairly crazy environment, and it takes a lot to make sure things are done responsibly. But that is in our DNA here. I mean, even before we had the SEMS management system, we were already doing that. We're already concerned about safety and material usage. The other thing is, of course, is energy consumed during our tenure at venues. We're now looking at venues from the point of view of how much renewable energy have they got available to us. This is really one of our luxuries, I suppose, of being an event of the size of ours, is that we tend to work with bigger venues that are more have progressed further in terms of renewable energy. So very often we end up with no emissions from energy. We're also very, very careful with things like legal compliance. So I think often when people are thinking about sustainability, they think about environmental protection, but actually the scope is wider because the scope is about legal compliance. For us to be a successful organization that balances risk with commercial opportunity, we have to look at complying with all the laws in the country that we have our exhibition held in, and also all the laws in the UK, because we're UK, our head office is UK based, and we have staff from the UK. So that amounts to something around 75 different lines of legislative compliance. It's something that is very much under the radar for lots of things, but we are audited by BSI, our auditor. And again, the reason we went for an international standard was because we knew that there was no place to hide. You have to have an external audit that has to be audited by a credible, nationally recognized certification partner, and it stands, sturdy and firm in terms of what claims we can then go forward to make.
Does this get easier year on year, where as you sort of
Well,
get
I
more
think
proficient at?
it did when we were working on ISO 2012-1 2012 version, because at that point we were getting more practiced at what we're doing. However, this year we've just transitioned to the 2024 version of the standard. That standard has much more in terms of compliance requirements. So we're now linking the objectives that we set for ourselves to UN Sustainable Development Goals. We have to look very closely at things like risk of modern slavery, child labour in our supply chain, and we have to think about climate change issues in a deeper way. So as the management system standard develops, we have to develop with it. And, I would be misleading anyone that views this to think that it is easy, and that sometimes if I had hair, I would have been ripping it out at points. But, it kind of goes with the territory of increasing the maturity of your management approach and risk management, working with, identifying all the interested parties that are involved in putting an event like this together, mean a ton of work.
Yeah, I bet. I'm wondering, 'cause obviously you're a different venue every year as well, aren't you? So
Yeah.
you don't have that consistency of location to fall back on with the paperwork.
No, every venue presents different challenges. What we're finding is that, sometimes we're working ahead of the venue's standard expectations from organisers. So we found that sometimes venues are less ready, and, we have to then be unfortunately, the bad guys who make demands and say, you have to, this is an obligation for you legally. So we understand that it's difficult, but you have to do it.
Yeah. I'm guessing there are some things that are venue specific, such as the catering and that sort of thing, where you're dealing with waste from that, or is that something is that part of your remit, or does that fall on them to sort out?
Well, of course, single-use plastics, like if you're in Amsterdam, there's national legislation to ban single-use plastics. So that is looked after by the venue caterers, and there is just no option to do anything other than that. It does vary from site to site. I think our attitude with catering is to try and ensure that we have catering that meets the diversity of needs of people. So, things like vegan, halal, there are lots of dietary requirements across such a diverse visitor base that needs our attention. But again, we're honestly, Jack, we're lucky because we're dealing with established venues that are they're doing shows all the time. So the trend is definitely, this is what needs to be done. This is what, like, I think other organisers like larger companies, Informa, those kind of people they're saying the same thing. We're all kind of singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak.
So in terms of your exhibitors, I mean, I presume they appreciate what you do. I mean, our industry is very focused on sustainability just by the nature of what we do. Do you get good feedback from them in terms of what you try to do for the overall exhibition?
Yeah, I mean, my personal experience is probably slightly more limited than some of my colleagues because I'm not generally in day-to-day contact with the exhibitor group. However, I do sit on I've joined the partner committee, so I'll kind of lead partners in the event. I think they really appreciate the fact that we are trying to make sure that we are attending to the detail. So yeah, I think it is appreciated. As ever, I think in all aspects of sustainability management, people don't want to pay you more for it. But maybe the counter argument, this is an investment in time and knowledge and effort. But the upside to it is the better you get, the more protected and resilient your business becomes. And that actually is I think across print, I think that is something that really matters. I think we recently produced a guide. There's a shameless plug.
Yes.
The understanding and avoiding greenwash guide that we've
Nice.
we've produced for members. That really trying to for us all to think about where we might be greenwashing, because
Mm.
it's a very easy mistake to make, and most greenwashing is not intentional. It's not, people are not trying to mislead, but we don't always know where the lines are. So
Mm.
we produced this with I don't know if you know Claire Taylor, but she's a chartered environmentalist and someone who's been in print for as long as I have, and is
Yeah, yeah. I know.
absolutely brilliant. And we're just trying to make these things more accessible
Mm.
to our members, because I think the advantages are material if you do the right things and then you derive the marketable value. Because I suppose I'm sure you'd agree with me that if you offer a service but can't communicate what the specific upside value of a even if it's very marginally more expensive material is, you can't be surprised when a client turns around and says, I'll just take the cheap version. And I think this is something that we all is an issue for so many people within a highly competitive business.
Especially at the moment when so many things are becoming so much more expensive, you do need to have that justification and the value,
Yeah.
the sort of, I guess, the commitment to wanting to do the right thing, but also within, not just for the sake of it, because there's some commercial viability there as
Yeah,
well.
it has to support your business, otherwise. But I think it's the marketing. And my attitude is right. You got to do things that you can measure. So if you set your benchmark today and you measure, say, your costs of energy and where your hotspots of energy usage are, and then you consider whether there are opportunities to reorganize yourself so that you can reduce that impact, and then you note what you've managed to reduce a year on, then you've got a marketable piece of value. You've got a little nugget of something that you can say, well, this is actually real life. This is demonstration of what we are doing rather than what
Mm.
we're talking about. In my experience, it is challenging, because some people will hold you up to a bar that is frankly ridiculously impossible to achieve, and then condemn you if you're not getting there. In the
Yeah.
real world, we all work in providing service, manufacturing, and real world situations. Well, an improvement is an improvement, and people should be appreciative of your attempts to improve.
A lot of what the things you talked about today and that will be happening at the show
Mm,
will be mostly invisible to people, because it's
yeah,
no one's going to know that the B matrix has been used however many
yeah. No one's
times.
going to know how many containers of how much we're making sure doesn't go to landfill,
Yeah.
how much we're looking at.
But how much will be? Well, is there stuff that people will be able to see, that they can see that that is a that's a big commercial difference that they can see when they're there? And what do you expect from people there? Because behavior is kind of another critical part of meeting your targets and the standards that you want.
I suppose our needs from exhibitors. So if you take waste, for example, our needs
Mm.
from exhibitors are to pay attention to what's in the exhibitor manual, and to abide by the terms of doing that. Otherwise, they face fines and sanction for doing it. But I think we're doing things for the right reasons, and therefore we want people to join us in doing the same thing. And yeah, there are, you always have issues, and breakdown is also, breakdown only takes, a couple of hours compared to days of build up.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? It's like it's a it's a weird compression of time to everyone getting out,
People want
getting
to get
out.
out.
Yeah, yeah. So we're just really, really scrutinizing people during breakdown. That's when we've got floor managers and people watching them. And if they're not compliant, then they, they can expect to be fined. And that's just how it is.
From the exhibit front. So in terms, I mean, FESPA's always big on education at the events.
Mm.
Are you involved in any of the sustainability seminars, or what can people learn about it while they're there
So
from a visit?
this particular cycle, so what we've done actually is we've used, everyone's under budget pressures, and, life is not easy for anyone at this point in time. So we looked at whether we do something conference wise or education wise in the event, or whether we use that budget to produce further guidance that's a bit more durable and lasting. As much as I would love to do both, and we have had our sustainability spotlight feature stands in past events, and I'm sure we'll do that again. This year, we decided that we would lean into looking at EU sustainability legislation. So, as we all know, there are lots of directives, regulations, documents that are in circulation about sustainable design practice to lead to more durable products, more repairable products, etc. CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, affects the largest customers. But, being in the supply chain of the largest customers doesn't mean that you're exempt from having to do some data gathering and contribute when asked for that. In fact, with a good number of larger customers, of course, the compliance starts when you're starting to pitch and tender for work. You have to show where you're at that point in time. So we're producing guides this year. We've like EUDR, Corporate Social Responsibility Directive, Corporate Social Due Diligence Directive, which rolls into digital product passports. And that's particularly important for textile printers at the moment, because fast fashion is a target for the EU to improve on. My view is that the EU Green Deal can only succeed with a cascading legislation and requirements being explicitly presented down to people that are producing and doing business. So that's going to be our focus this year. I would like to say that I really enjoy looking through EU legislation.
I think you do really.
People think I do, but I'm not sure I actually do. But I
Um,
reckon
yeah,
to take documents that are kind of objective, legalistic documents and trying to make them a bit more accessible and digestible to us mere mortals.
Yeah, how does it work with you with your sort of local associations? So I know obviously in the UK they have the big waste recycling program.
Yeah.
Presumably, I don't know as much about other associations. Do you work closely with them to support what they're doing on the sustainability front?
So we have 2 gatherings a year of our association members, and during those meetings, we present on what we're doing. So, like, the last meeting I had, we were talking about the Understanding and Avoiding Greenwash Guide, and we'll go through that with our members. I think what we're kind of doing is looking at the top line, the overviews of things, but we have to balance the pragmatism of, we cannot do how directives then are transposed into national legal frameworks. It's just beyond our scope of
Sure.
opportunity. But what we do is we work with our members who, do some fantastic work. I was in Portugal last week at Apigraph's conference, and I was talking with one of their lawyers about the work that they're doing to help members get into the national requirements. So that's kind of how it is. We have international reach, but we cannot always get into the nitty gritty of
Yeah.
national detail. But I like to think that collectively we all discuss and examine where our priorities should be. Within the framework of the EU, funnily enough, I was at a conference in Tirupur in India last year, and we were talking about digital product passports for the textile industry.
Yeah.
And you might think, well, what's that got to do with the EU? when you know that 30% of what's being produced in Tirapura is being exported into the EU, of
Mhm.
course, the manufacturers there and their understanding of the requirements is very pertinent. I think even though a lot of this sustainability legislation is ring fenced around European Union, and our audience is, our membership is much wider than that. There are a lot of our members in Mexico, for example, who would be exporting into the, relatively
Yeah.
affluent EU market.
Before we go, I appreciate your time today, but I'm sure you're incredibly busy leading up to the show. What are
Yeah.
you doing during the 4 days? What's your role? What will I catch you doing around the show
Okay.
floor?
So the one thing I really want to do, which I frankly get far less time to do, is to
Mm.
go around and look at tech and see what's going on, see the new
Yeah.
new product launches and what's emerging. Where you're most likely to find me is within the Club FESPA Lounge, where our members are holding their receptions. And I think my diary, there are invitations going out now for people to grab some time together. But even ahead of the show opening, we have our meeting of our members the day before the show opens. So much of my attention is kind of involved in prepping, planning, and delivering that. And
Yeah.
then we get to the show, and I just try and meet with members, try and catch up with, when you've been in the business a long time, there's a lot of people that
Yeah.
you like to bump into and catch up with. So
So you,
I'll be around, and anyone that feels that they want to catch up, collar me is what I say.
okay, but you might try and go incognito for a little bit and have a good look around at what's happening in the industry at the show itself. You might
Yeah,
try.
I'm not sure how successful I am at incognito, but I will definitely. I'm definitely interested to see what's developing. I am interested in like conference programs. I think there's a lot to there's always a lot to learn, isn't there?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I'm blessed this time. Normally, I have ISO on-site audits during the events. Very often, I found myself 2 days being scrutinised by an auditor.
Oh, wow.
This time round, the audits are all done, so I can
Good
really
stuff.
I really can enjoy the opportunity.
Good. Well, look, thanks very much for your time. Great work so far and everything you're doing, and look forward to hopefully catching up at some point at the show itself.
Yeah, I'm sure we will, Jack. I look forward to it, and I really appreciate the invite to chat.